Hey, I started the video up again, like I said. Oh, whoops. Harry Potter World. Or Wizarding World of Harry Potter, my bad. Harry Potter World. So, now to talk about kitchen. Kitchen, in many ways, was better, much better than front of house. Me, myself, I didn't like dealing with the customers so much. I'm pretty sure most people didn't like dealing with the customers, but a lot of the other people who worked front also didn't want to work kitchen because kitchen is in many ways worse than front of house because kitchen is a lot more dangerous than front of house. Let me tell you why. Kitchen is the place where you fry food, you prepare food, and where you cook food. The most dangerous parts of that kitchen are the fryer and the grill. Those are the two most dangerous parts. Oh, and the bun griller, the thing that cooks the buns, whatever. Basically, the grill that you're working with is upwards of 350 degrees the whole shift. And basically, what the function of the grill is not the function. What's attached to the grill is there's the main grill part, and then on top of that is a thin layer of a little mat, a non-stick mat, basically, that allows the heat to come through and cook the meat. Now, that by itself, that would retain a lot of the heat. But to make up for that, they have a top panel right here that swings down and presses down on the meat. So it not only cooks with heat, it cooks with pressure as well. So you're cooking both sides of the meat at the same time while pressing down on it, so it flattens out the meat as well. And it's pretty cool. You can cook like the regular burgers for the cheeseburger and the hamburger, McDoubles, all the smaller burgers, those burgers, they cook in like, you can get a whole batch of 8 in 45 seconds. So, and there's like 4 grills. So if need be, you can cook 8 per grill. So 8, 16, 24, 32. You can cook 32 burgers at the same time. It's 16 per tray. So you can get 2 trays just out of one side, but that's only if you use all 4 grills. You're not supposed to. You're only supposed to use the first 2 for those. The second grill, or the third grill, is usually used for the quarter pounder meat, and a couple other small things if you need to grill like sides or something. You use that because, for the most part, you usually don't cook a lot of quarter meat unless it's people want a lot of quarter meat that day. And then the fourth grill usually has some sort of like metal thing on it, metal like area thing, and basically you use that to cook chicken. You use that to cook chicken in the morning. Usually they use it to cook. Oh no, they use a little griddle. They use a little griddle on the side, but you don't use that during the afternoon. Well, now they do because they do all day breakfast. There's a separate little griddle for eggs, the round eggs. And then on the fourth grill, usually for grilled chicken. There we go. It took me forever to say it. Grilled chicken. You use it for grilled chicken. And you put the little metal square or metal rectangle there, and you put as many grilled pieces as you need, which is usually, I think, like 2 or 3, because usually there's not a lot of grilled chicken requested in McDonald's. Go figure. And you use the grilled chicken for the salads or the grilled chicken sandwiches. And you would put them in there. You put water in there, and then that water would create the steam, and then you would put a lid on it. You wouldn't press for the thing to come down. You wouldn't, because it's not used for that. you would put a little lid on it, and basically the lid would contain the steam, so it would cook it all around. And usually you pressed it one time, the timer went off, you turned off the timer, you flipped the chicken, and then you pressed the button again with the lid on. So you would cook it twice. The most dangerous thing about that, one of the most dangerous things, obviously, is the temperature, 350 plus degrees for the grill. But also the little hand that comes down. Basically, okay, so here's the top of the grill. Here's the top of the grill. There's a little metal face right here, right below it, with metal bars coming here to hold the trays. It holds a little holder which holds the trays in there, so you can put the meat in there and then just take it over to the shelves, the heated shelves, by the way. And on that metal face is a button, 2 buttons per grill. There's a red button and a black button. The black button activates the grill and causes the hand to come down. The red button stops the grill, whatever it's doing, and is supposed to bring the head back up. But the head goes all the way down first. It never stops in the middle unless you physically try to stop it, which there is a handle there for that exact reason. Because since the grill never stops going down on its own and you have to stop it yourself, there's been 1 or 2 times, it's never happened to me personally, but I can't imagine that it hasn't happened, where basically that you're putting meat down because you have gloves. You take the meat out of the freezer, raw meat. You have gloves. You break it apart. Usually how you break apart meat is you usually just grab however many you can in one hand and get the big stack in the other and just, slap it down. Try to break apart the ice that's on it. For the most part, you don't break the meat. The meat's not that brittle. But there's been a couple times where because the buttons are sticking out, they're not like pressed in. You don't press them in. Well, you press them in, but they're sticking out. So here's the metal face. Let me see. Not quite as big, but here's the metal face. Here's the button. That sticks out pretty damn far, right? So basically what you would do is you would lean over to put the meat down, and while you're putting the meat down, your thigh would accidentally hit this and press the button in, because you really don't have to push it in that much to activate it. So you press the button in, and then all of a sudden you would hear the beep, 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 and the thing would start coming down. And it almost crunched my hand in a few times, and basically when that happens, you're basically cooking your entire hand. And it would hurt like bad. And so that's one of the more dangerous parts of the grill. But one of the most annoying parts of the grill, which a lot of people don't work back there for, is when you cook that meat, there is a lot of grease that comes out of that meat, a lot of oil that comes, it's grease, a lot of grease that comes out of that meat. And so I would usually flip it. The entire concept of having 2 sides is that both sides get cooked, so you shouldn't have to flip it. But even when you cook it that long, 45 seconds, even with that thin of meat, it usually isn't long enough, so it's usually still bleeding a little bit. So I usually like to flip it around a little bit, let it cook on the other side, and then put it in the tray. And usually when that happens, there's a decent layer of grease off of all that meat. So it's just, all you hear is this crackling and popping of grease. And when you lean over to get the meat, it pops in your face, it pops on your arm, your neck, wherever is exposed, it'll just pop on there. And that annoys a lot of people, so they don't like to work on grill that much. Especially when you get those big pops. You get those small pops, but every now and again, you'll get that real audible pop, the one that takes a lot of grease and throws it at you. And it just like 5 places on your head. It just I eventually got used to it. I liked working in the kitchen so much that I just eventually didn't even care about it. It would land on my skin. I'll be like, ah, and then I would get back to work. I wouldn't give it much thought. And eventually I got to the point where even if it landed on my skin, I was so used to the heat of it that I just didn't even bother to react to it. That's one of the more, and we also had instruments to clean off the grease. We had a little squeegee that you would use to sweep all the grease into little grease pans on the side. We had 3 grease pans, 2 on the side. They were smaller ones, and 1 huge one in the middle. Eventually, throughout the day, obviously, with how many burgers McDonald's goes through, those would get full. And so one of the other duties of the grill person, we had a little machine. It was different in a couple places I worked, in the 2 places I worked. The first place I worked, we had a little hose, and we had a little a pipe inside of the grease pit, which had the grease all around it, or the oil all around it, grease, whatever. And it would basically fill up, and the pipe had holes, and so the grease would go into the pipe and go all the way up to the top. And you would basically put the hose into the pipe, because if you didn't, you would get all the other crap that's put into the grease pan, which is all the leftovers from all that meat and stuff that's cooked. So you would get a lot of burnt meat in there. You would get little chips of stuff left over from breakfast if they hadn't cleaned it before. And so it would clog up the hose. So you would have to put it in the pipe so it wouldn't clog up the hose. It would just suck up the grease. And then you would take it out, do the other 2, and then that was it. Then they changed it over to where the same machine that would funnel through the grease, but it was a big pan, a big pan. It was about this wide, maybe a little wider than that, and about that deep. So it was a pretty big pan, and you would just dump all the grease that you had in it. But obviously, when you dump all that grease, you would also get all the leftovers that were in there. So that got clogged a lot. So I didn't like that much, but it worked. So, and that was what the other McDonald's that I worked at had as well. So I didn't complain much about it. And it got really greasy up top. And at the end of the night, the worst things to clean were the grill instruments, because it was just so greasy. And the worst thing about it was that to make it easier eventually on myself, I figured out that if I didn't want to clean a huge amount of grease and oil off the top of the grill where we put the instruments, then I would basically have to put a metal pan under the instruments, so all the grease would collect on the pan. I could just lift up the pan and take it to the back. It took me like a year to figure this out, mostly because I was stressing about actually learning the entire job, and so I didn't think about it that much. But once I learned the job and I knew what I was doing, then it became pretty obvious to me. I was like, why didn't I think of this before? But then you had some people who didn't do that and just put the instruments up there. So you would have days where I would just, eventually I got to the point where I was just working at nights, because for the most part I was going to school. So I usually just worked later in the day. That's what they ended up scheduling me. So I usually closed for the last like 2 years of my working there. Like religiously. I was one of the better closers they had. So went back there, and immediately when I came in, I would look up on the top of the grill to see if they had, and about 5 out of 10 times, about 50% of the time, they would have one up there. 50% of the time they wouldn't. So, I mean, eventually they got the gist of it, and they just started putting them on the things, I think, because they thought it would just be easier for them. For some, I don't know. I don't know why they started doing it, but eventually they did. But every time I looked up there and I saw there wasn't one, I was like, oh my God, because I could just see the grease collecting on the bottom there. And there were 2 separate containers for the meat. One big one which held we call it the 10-1 burgers. But they were basically the regular sized burgers, the ones from McDonald's. 10-1 meat is what they were called. And then the 4-1 was the quarter pounder. So 10-1, a tenth the size of, I guess a tenth of a pound. 4-1, a quarter of a pound. But when you cook it down, it goes down to below that. But there were 2 different freezers for them, because usually the 10-1 usually held about 500 pieces of meat, and I usually ended up going through about 3 of them on an average night. So that's, if you do simple math, that's probably a little under 1,500, because usually the 3rd one would stay in there. So that's a little under 1,500 burgers per night. That's a lot of burgers. And then for the quarter meat, there were nights where I had to change it out a lot. There was one night I had to change it out twice, and I believe that one usually contains about 100 pieces of meat. So there were a lot of burgers, a lot of quarter pounder burgers going out some of those days. But also some days I never had to change it out. I think I took like 1 or 2 pieces of meat from there, usually the entire day, and that was about it. Those were pretty chill days, when you barely had to cook any meat. Grilled chicken, you just take it straight out of the bag. But you change your gloves obviously after every time. You had the regular white gloves, which you wore, regular white vinyl gloves, that you would have to wear after you would change after, if you touched yourself. If for some reason you didn't have blue gloves, you would have to change it after every time you touched raw meat. You would have to change it if you went to the bathroom, if you drank something, if you basically touched anything other than like the food you were preparing, you had to change your gloves. And obviously vinyl gloves, for anyone who's ever used them and knows about the properties of all that grease getting on those gloves, eventually, even though if you don't touch anything and you're just working on your station, you would have to change them eventually. I believe it was about every 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. So we went through a lot of gloves. A lot of gloves. Usually we would have to change out the glove box every I'd say we have to change it out every hour, because we just use so many gloves. And so basically you would do that, and I'm going to switch over to the table now where they make the food. This place isn't really that station is not that dangerous, at all. The worst part about that station is the shelves, because the shelves are heated to a decent degree. If we didn't have any customers at the time come in, but we were preparing meat because we knew there was going to be a lot of customers, because maybe it was right before a rush hour or a busy time that we usually have, because McDonald's has these things planned out. They have it down to the hour. They have, there's a little chart above usually the fry container where it points out how many fries they want ready for a specific time period if you're busy. Usually around 11, maybe 12, and 11 in the morning to 1 in the evening. was usually the busiest times according to the chart, because that was when it was like we want like 5 mediums, 3 larges, 2 smalls, and 1 kid or something like that ready. It was a lot of fries. That's why one of the people who, I might have already told this, there was one person who came in to work, and it was a really busy day. But I think personally, if you're getting ready to go into McDonald's, showing you some of the worst parts of McDonald's first, not going to get a good impression, but it's going to show you what exactly to prepare for when you're working there. Because if you go in on a slow day and then all of a sudden you come in and you're making fries nonstop and you're sweating and you're doing that for when you first work there, 3 hours, because I think under 3 hours or 3 hours and 30 minutes, I can't remember anymore. Under 3 hours and 30 minutes, there we go. You don't need to take a break. 3 hours and 31 minutes is when you start the 15. Yeah. And you do that, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, what happened? Like, I didn't know it got this busy. It's like, well, that was only because it was slow on your first day. It gets even busier than this someday. There were some days where we would have a rush for like, and we would be doing really well. Like, I'm talking, this was just a straight rush, a rush of rushes. This was a rush going for at least 4 or 5 hours. It was bad. People started breaking down, like crying, but still working. Like, I want to describe you how bad, like one of the worst days was I was working in kitchen. I love kitchen like so much more. Or I shouldn't say love. I like kitchen a whole lot more than front of house. So I was so glad I was working back there. It got so busy. My manager, there was literally 4 people in the back, 1 person on grill, and grill also, so you know, also handles the fryers, which I'll get to here in a minute. 1 person grilling me buns. I was the initiator who laid out all the papers, the paper holders. Put the buns down. I would put the ketchup, the mustard, and all the condiments on there, and then the initiator and the assembler. Good Lord, the assembler would finish off the sandwiches. They would put the meat on there, put the cheese where it was supposed to be, and then fold the sandwiches and put them on the heater. It was so bad that they stayed there like that for 4 hours, 4.5 hours. And my manager up front, because you have to have a back manager and a front manager. My manager up front was so tired. Everyone was so tired and so just fed up with this rush because they had been working hard. This is one of the few days that we had a crew that worked. So I saw my manager standing over near the heater in drive-thru, giving his bags to the person who was handing them out, and I saw him crying because he was so tired. He was so sore. He was just so done with this rush that he was crying. I could see the tears coming down his face, but he was still working, and he was mumbling to himself. He was like, I'm done. He's like, I can't handle this. I'm done. But he was still working. What you have to understand, I'm not sure if any of you have worked in the food industry and heard people go I'm done. I'm tired of this. I can't handle this. I don't want to do this. For the most part, I'd say about 80% of the time, we're just letting out our mental thoughts, we don't want to do this. We just don't want to do this. This is ridiculous. Why is it like this? But for the most part, they don't really mean what they say. Like I'm done with this. I want to leave. After this, I'm done. They're just venting their frustrations. You'll hear a lot of complaining in the food industry. A lot of complaining. No matter where I've gone in the food industry, it's always been complaining. I've gotten used to it. But it was bad. It was really bad. So I think if you're going to train someone, train them on a busy day, a day is going to be busy. Because if they don't get that first burst of, oh my God, this is what I'm going to be doing, and if they don't get hold of that job real quick, they're going to be blindsided by some of those days, and it's going to be bad. And this person who came in, worked this shift, back onto the story I was going to tell before I got off on a tangent. This person came in, worked the shift, worked the hard shift, told the manager, he's like, yeah, I can't do this. Gave him his uniform, walked out, and never came back after his shift. He full on went in his first day, worked that shift, said he's never coming back, and left after giving in his uniform. I thought it was hilarious. I thought that right there was just the best thing ever, because that was the only time I've ever heard of someone going in on their first day saying, nope, not doing it, walking out. Just because everyone around me is complaining. They're like, man, I need money. Man, I want to get some money. I'm like, well, just work at a fast food joint for a while. Get some money. It's like, okay. And then they come in and they're like, I'm not doing this. And then they walk out. It's like, oh, well, okay, let's see. At the time, I think the wage for new workers was $10. It was right. I think it was right after we got the pay raise. So he got $30 minus taxes. He probably got like 20 to 27, maybe 28, probably actually $26. So he didn't make jack. He didn't make anything. I thought it was just funny. Back onto what I was doing. The worst parts about the table, where you make the food, is basically the shelf where you keep all the meat, and the burger griller, the burger toaster. There we go, the burger toaster. God, bun toaster. Bun toaster. Sorry, I finally freaking remembered it. I've been forgetting so many things. The shelf itself is heated to keep the burgers from getting cold. Eventually they do, but it keeps the containers that the meat is in hot so that it heats up the meat. And sometimes if we don't have any customers, or not that many customers, we'll take new meat, even if it's still like slightly bleeding, but we know it's cooked. We'll put it in the shelf, and the shelf will cook it for us. That's how hot the shelf is. I thought it was funny a couple times, because stuff would drop. I don't remember what would drop in there, but stuff would drop inside of the shelf, and I would have to reach my hand in, because my hand was barely big enough so that my hand would go in unscathed, grab what I needed, and then come out. Sometimes I burn myself a little bit, but I usually had a glove on, so I usually just burn the glove. And it was pretty hot, so that was a pretty dangerous part of it. Another dangerous part was the bun toaster, and that was bad, because the only safe parts to touch of that were the area where the buns went into. That was the only part that wasn't heated. The back part where you put the buns in was heated. The sides were heated. The top was heated, because the whole thing is just a big oven for buns. And it got pretty bad a couple times. Had some person reach in to try to grab a bun and accidentally fell over, put their elbow on one of the sides, pulled it back, and there was a little burn mark there. It never got horrible though, but for the table, it was pretty bad. If you work table a lot. All right, now to move on to the worst part of the entire kitchen, fryers. The fryers are the worst part of the kitchen simply because there's so many things that can go wrong. So many things that can go wrong. One thing that went wrong one time was one of the maintenance guys forgot to they were cleaning out the grills because you have to clean out the oil every now and again. Otherwise, you'll just have dirty oil. Because you're cooking so much breaded shit in it that all that stuff gets in there, and it just makes the food look bad. It makes it look burnt when it comes out if you don't clean it. And we had a guy one time come in a couple times and complain about that. He's like, that oil is dirty, and it's dirty oil. You need to clean it out. But we're not maintenance guys. I'm not sure about you, but the place I work, we actually have people who know, like on the crew, how to clean out the grills, like how to do a burnout with the fluid in it, filter it out, clean out the pan, clean out the inside of it, and then refill it with oil. They know how to do that. McDonald's, you don't. You're not trained how to do that. That's a maintenance person's job. They do that in the morning, and then the rest of the day, no one else does it. Worst part about the fryer is just the oil itself, because if you do it wrong, shit can go bad with that machine. There was one time one of the machines overloaded and sparks started flying because one of the people didn't do it right, and they had to turn it off. It was bad. Stuff almost caught fire. And then another time, someone didn't filter it out right, and oil just started going everywhere. Like hot 400-degree oil started going everywhere. I'm not sure if you've ever seen someone get burned with oil, but I have. It's bad. Most of the time, since oil sticks to you, it doesn't get off, and that 400-degree oil stays on. And if your hand falls in that oil, most of the time your hand is going to get burnt. Third-degree burns every single time, and sometimes it'll get burnt so bad that the hand isn't even usable anymore. It's pretty bad. But that never happened over at McDonald's where I worked. One guy accidentally at Buffalo Wild Wings, his hand dipped in there real quick, and he got third-degree burns, but he was eventually back. His hand was all right. Luckily, he just got third-degree burns on the tops right here, and even then, it wasn't like, unsavable. He eventually came back. I think probably like a couple weeks later after his hand had healed up. Maybe it was longer. I can't remember. Probably longer. Now that I think about it. But a lot of stuff can go wrong is what I'm saying. But for the most part, no one really messed with it except to turn it on and turn it off. That was basically the only thing the crew did. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. I'm just talking mostly from a maintenance perspective, cleaning the stuff out. It was just, I wasn't maintenance. I was a crew member. But just talking from maintenance, from what they've told me, it could get pretty bad if you didn't do it right. And the worst part about it is the distance to the grill to the fryer was a decent distance. So if you had to cook a lot of grilled stuff, you would go over to the grill, but then you'd have a whole bunch of fried stuff And the fried stuff took a lot longer. Like the crispy chickens, those took 8 minutes to cook. And like I said in a couple of my last videos, McDonald's maximum wants you to wait most likely 3-4 minutes for one order. And if it gets that high, it gets bad. Like I had 170 seconds on one order one time, and that's what? 60 seconds, 2 minutes. That's a little under 3 minutes, just under 3 minutes. And I was getting yelled at for that. And it was bad. Like the times on it was 25 seconds to take the order. Probably 30 seconds to make the order. And then 15 seconds to bag the order. That's what they wanted. If you add that up, 15, 30, 45, that's a minute for an order. So they wanted it done fast. This was a fast food restaurant. They wanted it done fast. And anyone who waits longer than they should, they get apologized to profusely. And so that just makes the situation worse when people come back. Unless you're really understanding and you've worked fast food before, most likely you're not going to understand like why food takes so long. So you're going to get upset. You're going to get apologized to profusely, and your attitude towards fast food is never going to change. Because fast food companies, like a lot of companies, any company that wants you to buy their product, don't want you to feel bad about them, so they apologize. And then when they apologize, your attitude goes, oh, well, I deserve an apology every time this happens. So it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And some people just come and just start screaming when stuff doesn't go their way. But fried stuff took a lot longer to cook. The worst things were the nuggets. We had big baskets for nuggets that had little slits in them. You put 2 bags of nuggets per if you wanted to fill a whole tray. And each bag of, I believe, contained about 24 nuggets. So it was about 48 nuggets per tray. And there were a lot of orders for nuggets, a lot. Like nuggets, I went through at least 4 or 5 boxes of nuggets on really busy days. 4 or 5 boxes. 4 or 5, a box usually contains, I would say, 30 bags, maybe more of nuggets. So 30 bags times 24 nuggets. Here, actually, let me pull out my calculator real quick. No, I misspelled calculator. There you go. But yeah, the nuggets were some of the worst things, and the crispy chickens just took the longest. But the grill, the fryer are some of the worst. So 720 average, I would say, nuggets per box. So 720 times 5, 3,600 nuggets per day is what you would do on a busy day. It's a lot of freaking nuggets. And the average we made, I believe, at my McDonald's we usually worked, it was about $10,000, something like that. Most of that's usually in credit card or debit card transactions. So we usually don't have a lot of physical money. We just have enough usually to refill the drawers if they get low on a certain type of currency. But yeah, the fryer was just the most dangerous, just because of the oil, and just because you could drop things in there so easily. Like there were so many times where I dropped a fry box, not with fries, just a fry box. Like I would pull it out, I would start to get it to open. You would push the sides in, push the bottom in, and then just it would fall out of my hand and into the fry vat. And it was. We had a thing in there to pull it out in case you drop something in there, but it was still dangerous. But yeah, that was the worst part of it all. Oh, well, that's been a long video, 39 minutes. All right, well, I'll stop this, and then another time I'll go back to this, and I'll tell you exactly what was exactly how we cleaned everything, and just how how everything was done back there. All right, bye.